Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of DOCasts. In this episode, we're going to go over the initial server setup for the Ubuntu 14.0 droplet on DigitalOcean. Now, I do have to give the credit to Justin Ellingwood here for creating this tutorial and allowing us to access it through the DigitalOcean community. And basically what I want to do is walk you through this tutorial. So if this is your first time setting up a droplet, I want to walk you through how to initially set up your Ubuntu droplet so that you're a little bit more familiar with it and you actually have someone to hold your hand and walk you through all of this and explain the different things that might be confusing while we're doing this. Alright, so this is definitely a beginner's episode, and even if you've never initially set up your server before, this is definitely something you want to get in the habit of doing at the minimum. So we're going to walk you through the steps that are mentioned by Justin here, and then in a future episode we're going to go ahead and we're going to walk through the fail to ban where is it? Right here, the fail to ban option, where you can go ahead and install in your server to further secure your server against, like it says, brute force attacks that are directed at your server. For this episode, we're just going to walk you through setting up your server initially and getting everything going there. So let me go ahead and jump into DigitalOcean, and I'll go ahead and I'll type in initial setup here, and that'll be my host name. So we'll go ahead and select the size. We'll take the minimum one here. I'm going to select the region closest to me, and then I'm just going to select Ubuntu 14.04. It's going to be a 64-bit one. And then I'm not going to associate SSH keys for this episode because I want to show you exactly what it's going to be like when you get emailed that root password login, and then you'll have the ability to go ahead and set up your SSH keys at a later time. So I'll cover that in a future episode. So I just won't select one here, and I'll leave that blank. So I'll skip to the next settings area, and I'll leave this checked. I won't enable backups because enabling backups on your droplets will of course cost you 20% more on your droplet price per month. So I'm just not going to enable that, and I'm just going to create the droplet. So So DigitalOcean will go ahead and start creating that droplet. I'm going to pause the video real quick while it does that, and then once it sends me the password for my droplet, I'll go ahead and take it from there. Alright, so DigitalOcean went ahead and set up my droplet here. It also emailed me the password for my root login, and I have that within one of my notes. So I'll go ahead and I can pull up my terminal or my iTerm application, and I can SSH into root, and then I'll go ahead and I'll copy my IP address here, paste that in, I'll press enter. It's going to ask me to accept the authenticity of this host, and of course it's because we want to be connecting to something that we're familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and type in yes because I of course set up this droplet for our own personal use here. So I'm going to click on yes, and then I'll enter in my password here. Alright, so as soon as you log in, you'll see the system information, and then you'll see the request to change your password here. The first one you want to put in is your current password, and that is of course the one on my notes here. Now, why do they want us to change the password as soon as we log in? Well, first of all, it's highly recommended that you change this because when you receive your username and password via email, it's not secured. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you send someone an email, and let's say that they have a server administrator that manages the email and things like that, your email can actually be viewed in plain text by a server administrator. And that means that the username and password, if they're not changed, they are susceptible to being given to someone who may do something malicious with your login. So you always want to consider these kinds of things when you have a username or password just floating around in your email. This is why DigitalOcean's droplets go ahead and ask for it as soon as you log into them. So that's just one of the major reasons. Another one is because this is kind of hard to remember. Maybe you'd be looking for something that'd be easier to remember and something that you can type in all the time. Of course, I don't recommend that with your root login. I do recommend that with other user logins that we'll set up in a bit. But for the purpose of this video, take those two considerations and let's move forward. All right, so we'll take that password here. So it's asking for my current Unix password. I'll paste that in. I'll press enter, and you notice that you don't see the password if it's either pasted or typed in. And it looks like I may have mistyped it here, so I'll go ahead and I'll reconnect to that. I'll make sure that I have this copied correctly. I'll paste that in. Okay, then I'll paste it in again. And now we're going to enter a new one. And for the purpose of this video, because I'll be erasing this droplet in the future, I'm just going to use password here as my password. And that's going to be a capital P and the rest lowercase. So I'm just going to paste that in as well. I'll click on OK. You notice that you don't see your password here, and that's okay. The server will receive what you're typing in. You're just not seeing it because you don't want someone peeking over your shoulders and seeing exactly how many characters are in your password there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll paste it in again, and I'll click on OK or enter. And now you'll see that, hey, we're now logged in to our droplet, and now we can move forward with that getting started article within the community section. So I'll move this down and I'll take a look back at the article. Now the first thing that we're going to go over is the root login here. With the root login, you don't want to be logging in as root all the time to make changes and manage your server. You only want to do that in the special occasions when you need to log in as a root user. What you want to do is you want to create another user instead of root to use for managing your servers and even for allowing other people to access your server. Right now, even though we're able to log in as root, we're going to go ahead and add in another user and start logging in with that one. Go back into the article and you'll see that, hey, yeah, we did this step. We logged in as the root user. So if we scroll down to step 2, which is change your password, we already did that. But let's say that you want to change it again, you can use this password command. So if I go into my droplet terminal here, what we'll do is we'll type in passwd, and then we'll click on enter. Then it's going to ask you to enter in your new Unix password. Again, I'm going to go ahead and type in password. Okay, I'll retype it just to confirm. And my password was updated successfully. So I basically changed it to the same exact thing that we changed it to earlier. And you would just run this command anytime you want to change the password for the current user. But since we already did that initially, we'll jump back into the initial setup, go to step 3. So we're moving along here very quickly. Now what we're going to do is create a new user. And you can do that using the add user, and then we're going to follow it by the name of the user that we would like to have on our droplet. So we're going to add a user, and we're going to use John since that's my first name, and we're going to add the user John. So as you can see, after I clicked on enter, it went ahead and added the user, then added a new group, then added the user to that group, and created a home directory for this user, along with copying some files from the etc directory. All right, so we'll enter in a new Unix password for this user John, and I'm going to do the same thing here and enter in password, and then enter in password again. Now it's highly recommended that you enter in something that's not going to be as easy as password. You don't want to be putting something in that someone could guess. You know, you want to make your passwords a little difficult, easy for you to remember, but difficult for other people to figure out, so that they can't just figure out what your password is, jump onto your server, and do something malicious with your droplet here. With that said, you can go ahead and choose to enter your first name here. I'll enter John. My room number, you don't need to enter this, but I'll just enter in something just to have something there, which I'll put 11. And work phone, we'll go ahead and enter in a bogus number here for my work phone number. And my home phone number, we'll go ahead and we'll leave that blank. If we wanted to put something like a mobile phone number, you could do this here as well. And is the information correct? Yes. All right, we'll put in correct. And keep in mind, you can change this information in the future if you wish to. But for now, this is just what I'm going to go ahead and put. So Y for yes, and then you click on enter, and the information has saved. All right, so now that the new user has been saved, we can go ahead and move on to step 4, which would be setting root privileges for this user. But first, what I like to do is I like to check to make sure that this new user was in fact saved into the system. And you can do that using the cat/etc/password command. We'll go ahead and click on enter, and it will show all the users created by the root user or users within the Ubuntu system and the applications within Ubuntu. So as you can see, we had the new user John here with the phone number that I put in there and my home directory. Alright, so then we can also see the root user here with the home directory for root, and any of the other application users here like the daemon, mail, www-data, backup, and all those other application users. So that just tells you that, hey, your user was in fact created, and we can definitely move on to the next step. Let's go ahead and set up John with administrative privileges, otherwise known as sudo, which is super user do. And we'll go ahead and we'll go back into the command line and we'll type in vi sudo. With the sudoers.temp file open, what we want to do is add the user privilege specification for John. So we'll just use the arrow keys to go ahead and navigate down. And what we'll do is we'll start typing in John. And we'll press tab. Then we'll go ahead and we'll add in all equals. It's basically we're going to be copying what the admin user can do here. We should be all good here. Let me go ahead and put in a new line. And then what we'll do is we'll exit out and we'll save this. So the exit out will be Control and X. So we'll go ahead and use that on the keyboard here. Control X. It'll ask us if we would like to save the modified buffer. And we'll go ahead and we'll type in Y for yes. Now it's asking if we want to save it to this file name. And I'll just click on enter. And alright, so it exited out of it and it saved it for us. So we can double check that if we just press the up arrow, go back into vsudo, and then scroll back down. You'll see that we have user privilege specification, John. It's given all of it to us. And so we do have the administrative privileges. So let's go ahead and exit out of there once again using Control X. You'll see that this time nothing was changed. And we'll jump back into that tutorial. Alright, cool. So what this does basically is it sets up all the sudo privileges just like what root has, but for this user. And you can specify specific privileges for these users at a later time, in which we'll go into more detail in a future episode. For step 5, we have configure SSH. This is totally optional. So what you would want to do in this step is jump into nano etc SSH config. Now if you know me, you'll know that I don't like to use nano, so what we'll do is we'll jump back in here and we'll use apt-get to install vim. So we're installing vim. Now vim should have been installed. We'll check using vim -- version. Alright, if we scroll up, we'll see that we have vim installed and it's got 7.4 installed. Great. So what we can do is we can copy this file path here, jump back into the terminal, type in vim, paste that path in, press enter, and now we can use vim to edit our SSH config. Now I recommend, if you are going to be working with the SSH config, is reading all these comments here. And we're going to go into detail about using SSH in the future, but definitely if you are going to be working with the SSH config file, definitely read through the comments. Also, I recommend, and I'm going to exit out of here using the :Q, which will quit me out of vim. I definitely recommend copying the SSH config file. So what I would do is paste in that directory or that file path here. Then I would paste it in again, but I would add backup to the file name so that in case something happens where I just utterly screw up the SSH config file, I will have a backup to copy into production once again. And I can go ahead and do that just by clicking enter now with this command, and it should have copied it. So if I change directory into etc/ssh, so if I change the directory into there, I should be able to use ls to view the files in there. And I'll use ls-1 to go ahead and put that in one column. Notice that this file here was backed up into this file. So if we open up backup sshd config here, we should see the exact same thing. So I'll use vim, and then I'll just start typing in backup. I'll use the tab command to autocomplete and press enter, and you'll see that, hey, all the information that was in there has now copied over, so that in case something does happen, I can go ahead and rename this file to sshd-config and delete this one. So that's just a security and a redundancy thing that you might want to do anytime you change one of the configuration files for your server. All right, so with that said, let's jump back into the tutorial here. We are going to edit the SSH config file using the settings here. And keep in mind that if you do set this to another number besides 22, you're going to have to log in or SSH into the port number that you specify. So don't forget the port number that you're setting here, because if you do, it'll make it that much more difficult for you to get onto your droplet here. So we'll go back into the command line. What we'll do is we'll vim into the sshd config file. All right, so you'll see that this is set to port 22 already. What we can do here is we can change it to something else like 400 or 444. And for those of you not familiar with Vim, I clicked on the letter I on my keyboard to enter insert mode. You'll see insert mode in the bottom left of my terminal. And then what we'll do is to get out of insert mode, again, you click on escape on your keyboard. That will take you out of insert mode. And what that will allow you to do is, if you keep an eye on that bottom left hand corner, is you can press shift and then click on semicolon. We'll put W for write, Q for quit, and that'll bring us out of Vim here. It'll save the SSH config for us. Now, we will have to restart SSH in order for the changes to take effect. But before we do, let's go ahead and restrict the root login. So next, we need to find a line that looks like this. And actually, let me go ahead and click on up to get Vim open again. And we'll look for that permit root login yes, and we'll change it to no. So this will restrict root from logging in. Now keep in mind, after you set this, you don't want to go ahead and log out just yet. And that's because you want to make sure that the other user that you set up is working correctly. Scroll down and we'll look for authentication here. Permit root login. We're going to go ahead and change that to no. All right, I'll press escape, semicolon, and we'll write and make sure that has been written. All right, so that's been written. And then we can explicitly permit certain users. So if we want to, we can go one step further and we can allow only the users that we specify to log in via SSH. So what we'll do is we'll go back into Vim, and under authentication, I'm going to go ahead and add this line. All right, so we'll allow users, and we will allow John to log in. We'll go ahead and we'll write and quit out of this now. Now what we want to do is reload SSH. We can do that using service SSH restart. All right, so SSH was stopped and then it was started and it's now running process 1211. Now what we'll do is we'll try to SSH using our new account here, using SSH with the port number. So PU is stand for the port, and then we're going to use 444, and then we're going to put in John with the server IP address for my server. So let's go ahead and do that. It's important to remember you don't want to close this root server session just yet. You want to open up a new tab or new window to try this out in. So what we'll do is SSH-P, then the port number, then we'll type in the user name, and then we'll type in the IP address for that, and I'll go ahead and get that from my notes and paste that into here. Now I'll press enter. It'll ask for that password again. I'll type in my password. And all right, so now we're logged in using our new user. Safe to say that the new user was created successfully, and we can begin using this new user from now on. All right, so what you can do now is you can log out of root and begin using your new user. Now, one thing I do recommend is sometimes I just like to use root, and I won't always set the permit root login to no, because what I'll usually do in most cases is just make my root password extremely hard so that they can't crack it. And then what I'll do is whenever I need to use that, I'll refer to that password, which I do encrypt on my computer. What I'll do is I'll refer to that password so that I can log into it easily if I ever need to use root. So again, that's totally optional. But it is recommended within this tutorial, so that's what we did. And if you ever need to use root privileges within your new account, so let's say that we wanted to restart SSH here. So if I do service SSH restart, it actually won't allow me to. What I need to do is type in sudo service SSH restart. Then we'll type in the password for my account. Oops, looks like I didn't put a space there. And look, it worked perfectly this time. So anytime you need to use root privileges or administrative privileges, you just enter sudo and it'll jump into using those root privileges that you set earlier. So now all we have to do is we can either exit or log out, and each one will log you out of the droplet. All right, so congratulations on getting your droplet set up. With the initial server set up out of the way, we can start working into the intermediate and advanced topics of working with your DOCasts droplets. So keep an eye out for more secure server episodes, such as fail to ban and IP tables and so on and so forth, to protect your droplet or your VPS. If you guys have any feedback or requests, they are always welcome. Please sign up for a DOCasts account and leave your feedback for me to view. Thank you again for watching, and hope you have a great rest of the day.